Welcome everyone to to our study of Treasury of Precious Qualities, and thank you for taking time out from your holiday celebrations. I'm hoping everybody's having a wonderful time of celebration and hopefully a bit of relaxation. and let me see, I think next time we'll meet, it will actually be New Year. So basically, I should cover all my bases and just make sure that I wished you all the best for the holidays and all the best for the new year. Sorry, my voice is a bit having some issues. Okay, just a second. So yes. So as always, we kindly begin with the recognition of the value of studying and practicing the Buddha's teaching in order to get to the bottom of what causes the delusion of samsara. And any practice and study that we we undertake with this initial preparation. Call it Chorwa Semkye, the preparation with bodhicitta. You're looking at the great stupa of Gyaltse, which is it's in the lower part of central Tibet, and one of the important towns in Tibet. And this stupa here is known as the Kumbum stupa. There are a few. There's also one over in Amdo, and also there's another one in central Tibet, which was built by Dobopa Sherab Gyaltsen. But it's interesting that we actually have, I was just looking at this, and we actually have one like this in Australia. This is the very top of the what's known as the great stupa of universal compassion down in Bendigo in Victoria. And here's another picture of it from a distance. So yeah, it's really wonderful actually. This is the initiative of Lama Sopa Rinpoche, and yeah, it contains a lot of different temples. I haven't been there. Friends have been inviting me for years, but I actually didn't really know what it was. And now that I'm seeing these pictures, I think really I should take up my friend's kind offers and visit this place. So, the great stupa of universal compassion in Bendigo, and the great stupa of 100,000. 100 Kumbum actually means 100,000 statues. So this is a number. There are a number of temples in this great stupa, Gyaltse. Okay, so we'll begin with invoking our teacher, Omniscient Jigme Lingpa, the source of love and compassion for all beings, who knows all that is knowable. Emanation of Longchenpa, heir to a treasury of mind tamas, sky-like yogin of the vast expanse of luminosity, Jigme Lingpa, at your feet we pray. So in our study, we presently arrived at the second chapter, which is the chapter on impermanence. But I must say, I'm guilty of failing you in one regard, which is actually outlining the structure, even more basic to the entire work, than just the chapters, which are then essentially 3 sections. So there's part 1, and this is the one that we just studied, which is turning the mind to Dharma. Lo Chusojuro. So this is what we've just studied, and the intention there is to recognize the incredible fortune that we presently have. Not just been born a human, like we actually discussed last time, not just born a human, but actually born a human and encountering the Buddha's teaching. So like somebody pointed out, there's a lot of people who have human body, but not necessarily making that much use of it. So that's where we have presently the extraordinary fortune, the precious human rebirth. So with that reflection, we turn our mind to the Dharma. And now we're looking at the second part of the book, which is then an incentive for practice. And here we're going to be looking at impermanence. I think also the suffering of samsara. Actually, let's just look at the list of contents. Sorry about the voice. So here, yes. So we now are in part 2, an incentive for the practice. Oh yeah, and then part 3. Oh yes, the gradual path of the 3 kinds of beings. So that's where we remember we have the beings who simply just wish to be free of samsara, and those or rather be free of suffering. So that's where the reflections, the law of karma, is then the first one, and yeah, that's the first of the 3 kinds of individuals, just wishing to be free from suffering. And that's where, on the basis of understanding the law of cause and effect, we then generate the actions that bring about higher rebirth. And this is something we can see universally also. Individuals who understand what we call ethics, who have, you could say, a moral compass, moral direction, they aim towards doing what is, you could say, virtuous, what is constructive, creative, and as such then are persons who essentially generate a really strong sense of well-being. So this takes them out of the condition of suffering. Then there's the reflection that follows after that is then the law of karma, and that's then understanding the need for liberation, and that together with that. Oh, sorry. I don't know. Okay, yes, so that's beings of the lesser scope. Then those of medium scope, they're the ones, yeah, that's law of karma that that enables us to understand the value of our action, the impact of our action. And then for the beings of the medium scope, now the medium scope are those who wish to be free from samsara altogether. So this is then the second kind of individual. So that's where you then have you have those who reflect on the medium scope is then those who reflect on the suffering of samsara. So the individuals of the medium scope, they then aim to liberate themselves from samsara altogether. So this is then when we're already there, entering into the scope of the path of liberation according to the Buddha. And then, of course, then we're going to be looking at those extraordinary beings who then wish to be free altogether. So anyway, presently then, going back to the where we are now, which is before we're looking at this, we're not looking at the 3 kinds of individuals yet, but we're simply just reflecting on having then the opportunity of a precious human rebirth, then recognizing that something needs to be done. And that's where we would say an incentive for practice. is the reflection on impermanence. We sometimes refer to it as a crop. You know, when horse riders, they need to, you could say, give some incentive for the horse to move quicker, they use a riding crop. Mind you, my dad, who was a horse rider, never used a crop, and he was very successful horse rider. He actually, yeah, he did very well, and he never used the crop. So anyway, but we do refer to this as a crop or as a whip, simply just to get us going. And this is the reflection on impermanence. And we often say that among all the various reflections that we could have, actually, the reflection on impermanence is one that really leaves the deepest imprint. The image is like among all the imprints that one would find in the forest, particularly in India, the deepest and biggest imprint is that of the elephant. And similarly also then, that which leaves, the reflection that leaves the deepest imprint is the reflection of impermanence. So in here then, the first verse then reads, "The stable world with all its moving occupants is said to last a kalpa, which by its nature has 4 ages, forming, dwelling, ruin, and the void. It is disparaged with the name of basis of decay, for it will be assailed by 7 conflagrations and 1 flood." Some of you might be familiar with this from studying the words of my perfect teacher, the Kunzang Lama Shelong, in which we have then the world which lasts for a very long time. A kalpa is, according to the Hindu system, I was just looking it up, is 4.3 billion years. So that's how long we could say a world like we have it exists. But it has 4 stages, which is then coming into creation. Then it abides for some time, and then eventually it comes undone. And then after it's undone, then there's just void, space, for a while. And this is just one kalpa. Now, we would say that there are many kalpas, so we need to think big here. Time in this context, of course, we understand it as relative. We understand all of this as essentially being within the scope of the delusion of a sentient being wandering in samsara. But it extends for a very long time. Being a sentient being wandering in the delusion of samsara is not something that just sort of like we just snap out of it or it just happened. It's something that's been going on for a very long time. And as such, then, the world that we know it right now is just one of countless worlds and one that takes place within a period of countless kalpas. Anyway, this world is known as, in Tibetan, it's Jikten, which is basis of decay. And it's simply just because it is impermanent. It's unreliable. So there's a little bit of a, you could say, derogatory word with regards to this world. It is the basis of decay, and that will then be, this will be assailed by 7 conflagrations and 1 flood. We say there will be 7 great fires. There will also be a great wind, and then finally there will be a flood. So essentially, the world will eventually, this world that we're so attached to, and which is the basis for our existence, will ultimately be destroyed. It's something impermanent. So then, in the text, if I can find it, there we go. We contemplate impermanence in various ways, and we've just looked at the first way of contemplating impermanence, which is looking at the world, which again looks so stable. So it said it is written in the condensed Prajnaparamita Sutra, wind arises grounded upon space. Out of this, the mass of water stands, and thereupon the earth, the ground of living beings. Now we need to understand that in terms of our deluded perceptions, the initial deluded perception is where consciousness begins to think in terms of self and object, and then solidifies this experience of self and the perceived reality or the perceived field. And that's where then the mind then begins to solidify perceptions. And these become increasingly, you could say, solid, conspicuous. So we start off having the experience of space, and then from space then emerges, there's first movement. There's first space, and within space then there's movement, which is wind. And then on the basis of wind, then we have the element of water. And on the basis of water, then we have the element of earth. So this is what you could say the way that the 5 elements then arise. So Kangyur Rinpoche then, at this point, then quotes or brings in Jigme Lingpa's root text, and then he comments. This is what we've already read. Phenomenal existence, as this appears to deluded perception, consists of the 3,000-fold universe. Okay, 3,000-fold universe is essentially 1,000 in the 3rd power. So it's essentially 1 billion universes. So then what we mean with that is, and he continues, an inanimate basis or vessel together with the beings that are its animate content. So the Tibetan is chu, yeah, the container and the contents. And that simply means, you could say, the habitat where we live, the environment, the world, and then the beings within the world, which, as we know, is not just humans, but every living creature from insects to, elephants and so forth. So this is the world that we think of. Now, this universe passes through a sequence of formation, duration, destruction, and voidness. Now, there's quite a substantial, appendix. And I just want to introduce it to it. I'm not going to go through it. It's quite extensive, and also but it's worth looking. So I would say, if you have the book, please look at this. And essentially, it explains the world as it's understood in the Indo-Tibetan cosmology. But just because at this point I thought let's stay with the reflection on impermanence. But I would actually encourage you to have a look at this section, because this is, even though we of course operate with a different cosmology in the modern world, it's quite good to, you could say, be sufficiently cosmopolitan to be familiar with the Indo-Tibetan cosmology, because it comes up a lot. It comes up when we do mandala offering, and there's many references to this cosmology. There's different, in the modern world, there's different takes on this cosmology. And we need to understand that this is very much the experience of sentient beings, as we have sentient beings in you could say, the deluded condition of samsara, where different sentient beings have different perceptions of the world. So here we're describing the world very much according to the convention of the old India. But even the Tibetans will make a point, actually, that this cosmology is not absolute in the sense of something that you could say is one particular way. It's described in different ways. I remember Ujjain Topkar Rinpoche pointed out how in the Abhidharma, the the world and its formations is described in one way. In the Kalachakra Tantra, it's described in another way. But I'm just going to give you the image that we very often come across, which is a bit the universe looking a bit like this, where we then have the formation of the world as we saw it here in terms of space, wind, water, and then here we have the different continents. And if you do mandala offering, you'll be familiar with this. So then presently we are here in the southern continent then of Jambudvipa. And then here you have the Mount Meru, which is seen as the center of the universe. And above Mount Meru, we then have the God realms. So this is what you very often would come about in terms of the classical presentation of the world. But again, this is one of the less significant aspects of the Buddhist teaching. And of course, us who live in the modern world, we'd be very have a hard time really, you could say, and we might get lost in something that's not that significant. So the issue of whether the universe has a Mount Meru in the middle and the 4 continents, or it's the heliocentric universe that we're familiar with, is not essential. This is an important point, really. Different lamas have different takes on this. I'll quote the Dalai Lama, who was once asked, somebody asked, Your Holiness, have you ever found conflict between studying science and your Buddhist view? And he says, no, science has never, ever been a problem. In fact, it's enhanced my Buddhist view. He says, only one victim. I no longer believe in Mount Meru. So after looking at you could say the modern understanding of the universe and the way it's presented in terms of how we understand it on the basis of, astrophysics and so forth, then the Dalai Lama subscribes more to that model. But you also find lamas who will say, well, that's only relative perception and we should rely on what we have from the Buddha and so forth. I would say, please don't make that an issue. We in different cultures, there are different perceptions of the world. The Aboriginal Australians will have a different view, just like I'm sure the old Vikings had a particular view, etc., etc. We have to say the modern science, astrophysics, and so forth, astronomy, they have a rather, you could say, convincing science that we more or less, probably most of us, subscribe to. But that's where the point really is, that this is one of the less significant points in the Buddhist teaching in terms of just the outlook of the universe. However, the point here is not what does the universe look like. The point here is for us to appreciate the impermanence of it. So however we construct the universe, the main point is that we meditate on the fact that this won't last. And as such then, they're referring to the universe as the basis of decay, the Jigten, is totally, you could say, appropriate. So the point is really just to understand the impermanence of everything. At the same time, also, if we can immerse ourselves in this you could say cosmology, it's also quite helpful, and in a way that gives some sense of you could say, the enormity that we're talking about, the enormity of time, the enormity of the universe, and so forth. So, so here, for example, it says so we talk about, again, this of course is universal, the fact that the universe comes into being, or you could say the place where we're living and so on, is something that comes into creation. It's there for a while, it comes undone, and then there's space. So that's in terms of, you could say, the space or the place that we live. Now, in terms of time, Kangyur Rinpoche then continues. Each of these phases, meaning this universe, lasts for 20 intermediate kalpas. Now, a kalpa, again, like I said, that's 4.3 billion years according to the Indian way of measuring. And when we say 20 intermediate kalpas, an intermediate kalpa is is the time that, what is it again? You have the, let's see, hold on, let me just see, because I found actually a definition of a kalpa here. Okay, yeah. So in one of the scriptures, this is from the Pali Canon, it says, suppose, this is the Buddha speaking to one of his students, a monk. It says, suppose there were a great mountain of rock, a league long. Now, a league is approximately 5 kilometers. So you have a 5 kilometer long rock, a league wide, 5 kilometers wide, a league high, that high, uncracked, uncavitated, a single mass. And a man would come along once every 100 years and rub it once with a kashi cloth. A kashi cloth is like soft linen. More quickly would that great mountain of rock waste away and be consumed by that effort. But not the eon, kalpa. That's how long, monk, an eon is. So, so you have the, what is it again? I think a kalpa is 1,000, yeah, that's, sorry, 3,000. I'll look this up and I'll have it for you next time. But anyway, there's the 20 intermediate. An intermediate kalpa is, okay, so you have a kalpa which is then, I think, no, I'll look it up. Anyway, it's a very, very long time. Okay, we'll save it. Okay. Anyway, so each of these phases of the universe lasts for 20 intermediate kalpas, and 80 taken together makes up one great kalpa. Okay, so that's a great kalpa. That's an extremely long time, right? So if we have 20 times the, that's 80, that would be 80 billion, 80 billion years. And then 80 times 80, that would be what, 6,400 billion years. That would be what, 6 trillion years? 6 trillion years is then a great kalpa, something like that, but I'll do some research. Anyway, an enormously long time, right? So that's how long we would generally understand a kalpa. A single universe, which is the impermanent environment of living beings, comprises 4 continents situated around a Mount Meru with its celestial abodes of the desire realm and the pure realm of form. So this is where we looked at before, this image of Mount Meru, which then has these sort of four continents, and also Mount Meru, and that's where we see what is then referred to as the realms of form, are then the God realms that have form. There's then the God realms which don't have form. They're beyond, then you could say, the physical. Anyway, 1,000 of such universes make up a so-called thousandfold universe. Okay, 1,000 of these form an intermediary universe. Yeah, this is where I got a bit confused. So that means 1,000 times 1,000. That's an intermediary universe. And yet again, these again multiplied by 1,000 comprise what is known as great 3,000-fold universe. This is what we call Tongsumki Jigten, or the 1,000-fold or 3,000-fold universe. But the thing is, when we say 3,000-fold, it actually means 1,000 in the third power. So it's actually a billion-fold universe. So we can understand how this universe that we know, that multiplied 1,000 times, that's then multiplied a billion times. The world as we know it multiplied a billion times is then what we understand as the 3,000-fold universe. Now this is relevant for you if you're practicing mandala offering, because when we offer the Niyamanakaya mandala, we're thinking big. And this is where it's fine to look into astronomy and begin to have your mind blown by the entire idea of infinitude. Essentially understanding then also how, when we're making this offering, then we're offering this infinitude of the physical universe. In Tibetan, the word for universe, Jigten, is a pejorative term since it means basis of decay. Okay, Jig means something that will be the decay, and ten means the basis. Yeah, so you could say impermanent basis. It is so called, Kangyur Rinpoche says then, because from the moment it comes into being, decay and death are intrinsic to it. One could almost say that the world and its inhabitants are tormented and punished by these four phases of formation, duration, destruction, and voidness. Indeed, the root verses specifies that there will be 7 destructions by fire and 1 by water. Okay, sorry, yeah. As in the Aniccarta Parikata, where it says, then the earth will be destroyed, then the mountains will collapse in dust, and all the waters of the seas run dry. No need to mention then the fate of living beings. Now this contemplation here is really just for us to gauge impermanence, because we think, okay, you know, we have a short life, but the world around us will continue. Well, even the world around us that seems so solid, that too is subject to decay. So, of course, as far as we're concerned in the present day and age, where we are looking at, you could say, how the periods come and go, and things look as if they could not. As we look at the the history of the earth, then sometimes we, in particular, we look at the situation of the earth presently, then we might get a bit worried. And I remember an old Indian chief, American Indian chief, who says, "Don't worry, the earth will be fine." You know. So of course, compared to the humans, yes, the earth is fine. The earth will go through all sorts of different changes, but even the earth, which seems to be so solid, that too is impermanent. So this is why we, meditating on impermanence, we begin first with meditating on this apparently solid universe. So would you please be able to share that image of the world? Sure, I'll put it up in the resource folder. Sure, yeah. Okay, the impermanence of living beings. All right, so let's look at the second verse. It says, the teachers of the gods and humankind perceive our trust impermanence, and therefore, though they have supreme and adamantine forms, relax their hold on indestructibility and joyfully display their passing into peace. So this refers to the Buddha. The Buddha, or the Buddhas, who are then the teachers of gods and humans, they see that we tend to hold on to things. We're a little bit superficial, a little bit ditzy, and not that perceptive about the fact that we actually won't last. And we can sort of humbly look at our own perception of things and see how preoccupied we are with what is in fact very fleeting, very volatile. And for that reason, the Buddha, even though the Buddha achieved the Dharmakaya that is beyond coming and going, in terms of manifesting in this world, then the Buddha manifested passing into peace, passing into nirvana. So this is you could say, a reminder to the rest of us that even the Buddha who's enlightened also passes away. Kangyur Rinpoche comments, because they see that ordinary beings entertain false views, imputing permanent existence to what is composite and fleeting. The Buddhas, foremost among the living and teachers of gods and humankind, display their joyful passing into nirvana. even though they possess the supreme and adamantine form, the Dharmakaya, that is immune to decay. They relinquish their capacity to remain forever, untouched and unmarred by the passage of time. Therefore, if Buddhas themselves are impermanent, is there any need to doubt the transience of ordinary beings whose lives are as fragile as bubbles? So this we would always say when we look at great teachers or the Buddha and so forth, that their displaying coming into this world and passing away is simply just a message to us. Buddhas manifest on the basis of the merit and the aspirations of sentient beings. And then as part of that teaching, then they display passing into nirvana. So that's how we would see the passing of teachers, simply just as a gesture of kindness. Sometimes we refer to the passing of teachers as changing Buddha field, or simply just waking sentient beings from their grasp on impermanence. And here then it says joyfully passing into nirvana. So the Buddha has no apprehension about passing away. This reminds me also of Saint Francis, San Francesco, who it said passed away singing. So for great sages, and of course particularly then for the great enlightened ones, there's not so much worry about passing away. So then the third verse. Those perfect in samadhi may sustain great spans of life, but all to no avail. They must endure mortality. Brahma, Shiva, Ishvara, and all the Chakravartins find no way to flee the demon lord of death. So we think of those who are at the level of the God realm of form, of course, but also those who even are in the subtle realm, God realms, which are beyond the physical. They also still haven't relinquished really their fundamental cognitive obscuration that thinks in terms of self and thinks in terms of time, space, etc. And so even though they abide in this condition of, you could say, complete peace, eventually that is impermanent. So we'd say Brahma, Shiva, Ishvara, and all the Chakravartins, meaning all the gods, and also all the great beings of the universe, such as the owner of the universe, the Chakravartin, they're all subject to the Lord of Death. So when we say the demon Lord of Death, we talk about that there are 4 demons. So there's the demon of the skandhas, the kleshas, the demon of comfort, and then also we have the demon of death. So this is one of the 4 demons. We say the Buddha vanquished these 4 demons. But for those who are not Buddhas, then there's still the conditioning of death. So Kangyur Rinpoche comments, some beings perfect the 4 worldly samadhis and the different levels of absorption. As a result, they can sustain the burden of a lifespan ranging from an intermediate kalpa in the heaven of the pure up to 80,000 great kalpas at the peak of existence. So this is, so we would say at the level of the these gods who remain in samadhi, they then sustain an incredibly long lifespan, an intermediate kalpa being a very long time, as we've seen, 20 kalpas, so 80 billion years if we are to, or also you have in the image there of the great rock, right? So anyway, for an incredibly long time, they then abide in samadhi right up to the highest level of samsara, which is called sithe, or peak of existence. So this is where, at that point, such beings might think, oh, we've attained complete freedom, moksha. But there still is the sense of I. So that's where this is still not freedom from samsara. So Kangyur Rinpoche continues, but even this falls short of the goal of permanent happiness. Even beings like this must follow the effects of their black and white actions, and without a doubt will come to die. Brahma, Ishvara, Shiva, Vishnu, and the other gods who possess supernatural knowledge and miraculous powers, together with all the Chakravartins, even they are disappointed in their bliss, for they know of no way to escape the demon lord of death. What need is there to speak of people like ourselves? So we would say this is the great pain of the gods. Even though the gods, they endure a very long time in samadhi, then eventually they fall. And that's why we would say there's tremendous anguish associated with that. Because of their clairvoyance, they can see where they will be reborn. They can see how their karma has been exhausted, and then they fall. And at that point, then however long time they were in samadhi, it's all in the past. It will just be like last night's dream. It will just be a memory. And as such, they're no different from the rest of us. So if such great beings, who are the object of great veneration, great respect, and immensely powerful, if they can't escape the Mara of death, what need is there to speak of people like ourselves? So, for those who flock so carefree in the wholesome vales of higher realms, the hunter lies in wait, his weapon in his hand, conspiring how to rob them of their lives. He thinks and thinks of it and has no other thoughts. So you could say impermanence is always there. Impermanence has nothing else to do besides be impermanent, if you like. So that's where those who presently are enjoying the higher rebirths, all of these will also succumb to impermanence. To enjoy perfect happiness and pleasure in the higher realms of samsara is to be like the deer roaming wild and free for the 3 months of summer in a landscape filled with wholesome plants and flowers. But just as the hunter lies in wait, hidden from sight in a gully on the mountain side, thinking constantly of how to kill them, the robber of death, with his deadly club in his hand, thinks of only one thing: how he might draw beings into the snare of death and steal away their lives. As Ashvaghosha has written, one of all those born upon this earth or in the higher realms, did you see or hear or even doubt that some of them were born and have not died? Now, I'd like to say, for us who, of course, are presumably, we're very much living in a discourse, a cultural discourse, a dominant discourse of permanence, which the modern world is all about, selling us the idea that we're here and we should just have a jolly good time. And when it's over, hey, it's over. You only live once. When you're dead, you're dead. And that's where we presently then would think, well, this is here I am normally entertained. I have all sorts of entertainments happening. And when the time comes, well, that's just sort of somebody switches off the light. This is rather depressing. But of course, the point here is to understand that the present delusional condition that we find ourselves, the nature of it is not, you could say, dependent on any physical or you could say relative conditioning. It is simply just a delusional condition in which we hallucinate lifetime after lifetime. And there's a way out. So we're not stuck with this. All of us here presumably have received instruction. We all have received instructions on meditation, instructions on how to integrate meditation in post-meditation. And as such, we have a path. But there is, in addition to understanding, you could say, the nature of reality, there's also a need for understanding how we presently are caught within irreality. So we have a path, but we also need to understand how we, as much as we have this path that aligns us with reality, we are also presently prone to delusion. And that's where we need to understand presently it's so important that we extract ourselves from this delusional condition. We have all the methods for doing so. So we needn't get despondent when we meditate on impermanence. It's not as if we're just saying it's no good. It's just nothing lasts. Is this what we're stuck with? Because that's not the point. The point is we have a way out, but we need to understand how this present condition that we have, the precious human rebirth, is impermanent. So we meditate on impermanence from the point of view of, like it says here, an incentive to applying ourselves to the practice. So the point here is very much there's a constructive angle in this. It is that we can do something, but we have to do it now. We have every means in our hands to extract ourselves from this. There's no reason why we shouldn't do it, but it's important that presently when we have the opportunity that we don't waste it, and that's where this reflection here is very helpful. So the next stanza reads, tormented by the summer's heat, beings sigh with pleasure in the clear light of the autumn moon. They do not think, and it does not alarm them, that 100 days of their days has passed away. So again, tormented by the summer's heat. This, of course, this is again what's so beautiful about someone like Jigme Lingpa, where you could see the imagery here, and it's beautiful poetry. Draws so much on the Indian, you could say the Indian realm. This is a reflection on how all the people in the Himalayas, the Tibetans, the Bhutanese, the Nepalis, all really look to India as the Holy Land. And that's where there is this continual reverence for the place from which the teaching originated. This is a good example for us in the modern world, who very often are so keen to sort of establish our own new independent Buddhism and sort of assert some sort of autonomy. But actually, the greatness of the Tibetans really lie in the incredible veneration for the Indian, you could say, the Indian world, and that's reflected in this sort of continually drawing on Indian imagery. Anyway, the point here is then, as we know, or if you've been to India as in the summer, it's very hot. And that's where when finally autumn, when the fall comes along, then it's such a relief. Everybody's happy. Sometimes in India, it's so hot that you don't go out during the day. You wait till it's nighttime. All the bazaars, they open at night because nobody can bear to go out during the day, sort of. So that's where the autumn is just such a relief. And the autumn moon is seen as something that brings about this relief. The point is, if we come around to a season that we like, is that we almost forget, hey, you know, there's actually, life is passing by. And that's where, again, where we're stuck in our superficiality. You know, it's like in where I come from in Denmark, then, you know, once summer comes along, you know, it's May. Kom maj du søde milde, you know. As soon as May comes along, it's already gentle and nice. You know, we have harsh winters, but as much as we're happy about summer come along, we should actually also reflect, hey, time is passing once again. And all of us who lived a certain amount of years, we realize how fast these years are running along. People are tormented by the heat of the early summer and cannot bear to go out in the sun. They long for the cool light of the autumn moon, but they do not worry. In fact, the thought never crosses their minds that with the arrival of autumn, 100 days of their lives will have passed and brought them nearer to their deaths. People also mourn at the deaths of others, without reflecting that the Lord of Death is advancing upon them as well. They spend their time immersed in the hopes and fears of life, as though they were going to live forever. This is so foolish. As it is said in the Aniccatta Parikatta, To enter on the path of life adds nothing to your length of days, and death is not a flaw within the scheme of things. Why, therefore, do you sorrow at it so? So this is, again, the condition that we live under, which is life means that we are going to die. Kangyur Rinpoche, actually, as most of you know, wrote a book called Living is Dying. To be alive is to die. And incidentally, actually, in March, I'm going to put this program on hold. We're going to be spending some months on this book, actually, Living is Dying. This is very much the initiative of Sitting Children, and it will be one of the instructors here in Australia. And there'll actually be quite a few people involved with that. There'll be different people who care for those who are dying and in various ways as spiritual caregivers, but also as medical staff and so on. So they'll be running for a few months. There'll be a program called Living is Dying that starts March 20. But anyway, the fact that things don't last, that's just the way that they are. It's, you could say, reality, and there's nothing wrong with, you could say, the reality itself, but it's on the basis of our particular subjective angle that reality is difficult. And that's why we could say the reality of impermanence is painful, because we hold what is impermanent to be permanent. We could say the the nature of reality is without a self, and yet it becomes difficult because where there is no self, we hold onto a self, and so we're colliding with reality. But it's on the basis of this reality then that we take into account then that we are presently subject to impermanence as something that is something that we want to consider, and something that we meditate on in order for us to greatly appreciate our present condition. So that's where we need to not be, you could say, at odds with the fact of impermanence. We don't have to say, damn, things are impermanent. It's just that things are impermanent. We shouldn't be naive, and as such, we should practice the Dharma. Okay. We'll leave it at that for today. I'm still confused when you say Buddha passed into Nirvana, but we also learn that samsara and Nirvana have to be transcended because both are impermanent, and one should eventually, this is a very good question. Let's see here. Because both are impermanent and one should eventually come out of Nirvana. Can you please clarify? Thank you so much. Yeah, this is a bit confusing, and what we refer to when the Buddha passed into Nirvana is actually Mahaparinirvana. So when we talk about how we aspire, for example, as bodhisattvas, we aspire, may I not dwell in samsara, may I not dwell in nirvana. And when we say nirvana there, we're not talking about Mahaparinirvana, we're talking about the essentially the arhat's nirodha, or nirod, which is Gokpa in Tibetan, and it really just means the arhat condition of simply just dwelling in a condition that is without any suffering. And that's where we would say, from the Mahayana perspective, we say that's completely fine. That's like if we're crossing a great ocean and we come to an island, hey, there's nobody blames anybody if they want to stop on the island for a while. But we shouldn't be fooled, and we eventually need to move on if we want to become perfectly enlightened. So that's where, when we say the Buddha passed into nirvana, then we would say the Buddha displays simply just dissolving this form. The Buddha, from the Mahayana perspective, is fully enlightened, and so the Nirmanakaya is really just a reflection of the Buddha's enlightenment. So that's for the Buddha, there's no coming and going. There's the dissolving of the temporary form, but there's not there's not really any change. In some traditions, it's a little bit different. There we would say until the Buddha passes away, he still has karmic traces and then enters into a condition of peace. There's a little bit of some differences between the traditions and how we perceive it. But certainly when we talk about transcending both samsara and nirvana, we're talking about transcending the small nirvana of the arhats. Nirodha, the arhat's dwelling. Yeah. Can we ask you questions while you're in retreat? Sorry for asking that. If it's not good, totally understand. You can ask them here. This is actually I've included this program in my retreat, so you can ask me questions here. You can send me an email, but I won't be answering it until I'm out of retreat. Yeah. Does Buddha see this impermanent world that we see? Thank you. Very good question also. We would say the Buddha has two kinds of wisdoms. There's the wisdom of these things as they are, and as such, the Buddha is not prone to the projections that we have. But we experience this world, right? And why the Buddha can teach us is because the Buddha has the second kind of wisdom, which is seeing things how they appear. We say seeing how things appear in their multiplicity, meaning seeing how sentient beings perceive things. So right now we have a particular world, we see it in a particular way, and the Buddha knows how we see it in different ways. But we would also know that different beings, they see this world in different ways. If you read the Vimalakirti Desa Sutra, there's a famous discussion between a god called Brahma Sikhin and the Buddha's student Shariputra. And they're having an argument because Shariputra says, this world is full of suffering. And the god says, no, this world is beautiful. You know, don't you see? And then they take their argument. So they're saying, who is seeing the world more validly? And then they come to the Buddha, and the Buddha then, on the basis of his power, he can introduce Shariputra to the way in which he sees the world. And then all of a sudden, the Shariputra sees the world perfect without any of the ordinary projections that he as a normal human has. And it's much closer to that vision of the God. We would say the God also has some cognitive obscurations, of course, but the God has less cognitive obscuration than Shariputra has. And so that's where the Buddha then says, look, he says, this is how the world is seen, this is how I see the world. But I can't help that sentient beings, they see the world according to their ordinary impure projections. And that's why we would also say that this world depends on who we are. We all see the world differently. And for example, we famously would say, for example, a glass of water is seen differently according to the 6 realms. Yeah, each of the beings of the 6 realms see a glass of water differently. The gods would see it as a nectar, and for example, hungry ghosts would just see it as pus. Hell beings would just see it as fire, and so forth. Hi, can you explain the term Buddha field? I have been wondering about the many Buddha fields as they are mentioned quite often in the teachings. These places where Buddhas abide and everything is pure kind of thing. Yes, thank you. Okay, so we should understand it in different ways. There's the Buddha fields that are manifested according to the prayers of great beings. For example, we would say the Buddha Amitabha, on the basis of his prayers. Then those that are connected with the Buddha Amitabha, there's an actual Buddha field, an actual place to go to. Those that are connected with Guru Padmasambhava have an actual Nirmanakaya Buddha field that are a place to go. So that's why we would talk about these as actual places. So we would aspire, may I be born in this place or that place. And so, for example, in China, you have very many Buddhists would aspire to be reborn in the pure realm of Amitabha. Also in Tibet, and in the Nyingmapas, many would aspire to be reborn in the pure realm of Padmasambhava. But we would also understand the pure realm or the Buddha field in terms of the intrinsic nature of reality. So, for example, those who practice Vajrayana sadhana would see everything as a pure realm, simply just understanding everything as being the display of wisdom. So at that point, seeing the phenomena as they actually are. So that's where the Buddha field, there we would talk about that as the Sambhogakaya Buddha field of, you could say, the display of wisdom. So there's a little bit difference there. I'm also in a small retreat. Oh, hold on. Is the implication that Shakyamuni Buddha simply engaged with the first 29 years of worldly life as part of a lesson? Was he aware he was a Buddha at the time, or did he only become aware at his enlightenment? Well, we'll have to ask him, but the Mahayana view would be that really the Buddha just manifested this as part of essentially to demonstrate. So we would say prior to the Buddha taking birth in this world, he was what is known as the white lotus, the Bodhisattva white lotus, and he was abiding in the pure realm of Tushita. And at that time, he says, okay, now I'm going to manifest within this particular world. Maitreya, you'll be next. And he passed on you could say, the regency to Maitreya. And then he took rebirth in this world. And we would then say his display, his various ways in this world were then displays in order to train us sentient beings. So someone says, I'm also in a small retreat at home, mainly practicing Ngunduga. I repeat 4 times of my daily practice during the retreat. Then I feel reciting some content 4 times the same day also is too repetitive. I want to recite some other sutras like Heart Treasury Sutra. Is it acceptable? Will you have any suggestions about how to do a retreat at home? Well, if you do a retreat, actually, we're going a little bit over time. I hope that's all right. If you're doing a retreat, and you're doing that seriously as a retreat, then the first 7 days, you can actually count all 24 hours for the first 7 days. Beyond that, then you just count the hours that you're actually doing Ngundro, Ngundro practice. But of course, if you're doing practice, then you do as much Ngundro practice as you can, and you count that as Ngundroga. But I would say if you're in retreat, then do other things as well, like you're suggesting, counting the Heart Sutra and so forth. You don't count that as part of the Ngundroga, but it is something that is very helpful and will inspire your Ngundro practice. So recite that. There's also the, what's it called again? Huawei, what's it called again? In the Chinese, there's a really beautiful Huawen Sutra. There's essentially the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is very large. So you're going to have plenty to read there if you read the Avatamsaka Sutras. Huayen, yeah. So but there's many, now we have 84,000, we have many sutras to choose between. But impermanence is good news when we are tormented by pain and confusion. No, yes, of course, yes. That's something so often makes that point. We shouldn't be angry at impermanence. But right now, we're trying to generate some, you could say, a bit of momentum and a bit of, you could say, awareness that life is running out. So impermanence here is to understand that our present conditions for practice, they won't last. Is Buddha field and mandala the same? I suppose you can say so. Yes, mandala generally has a sense of environment. So we sometimes also refer to, for example, the Nirmanakaya Buddha field as the environment. So, for example, our world we can see as a mandala. And sometimes we talk about the mandala of the teacher and so forth. So mandalas can be different things. But Buddha field, then again, we have 2 kinds. We have the one that's manifested on the basis of prayer and those that are manifested on, say, the intrinsic purity of phenomena. And that's where when we're meditating on the intrinsic purity of phenomena, as we do it in sadhana practice, then that's the same as mandala. Yeah. Perfect teaching for the turning of the year. Grazie, buona anno. Anche a te. Thank you. Disciple of wisdom, can you explain the JL short offering, where food is display of wisdom? Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, there is a food offering in which we offer food as wisdom. Well, in general, whenever we just when we eat, it's always good to just introduce mindfulness, and as such, we make an offering out of it. Yeah, yeah. Huayan, yes. Ornament Sutra. Yes, the flower ornament sutra. Yes. Huineng, that's different. That's the sutra of the sixth patriarch. That's a little bit different, yeah. All right. So thank you very much. We'll conclude at this point. Through all our births, where we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. Just one thing, somebody mentioned the Sutra of Huineng. By the way, that's also, yeah, we were talking about Huayan, but of course the Huineng Sutra is also a really good sutra to read. So by all means, please read the Sutra, the Sutra of Huineng as well. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the reminder. Can you spell it here? Spell what? What do you need spelled? I'm happy to spell it, but the sutra. Okay, there's the Huineng, the Sutra of Huineng. Yeah, yeah. Also known as the Platform Sutra. Yeah. This is a very interesting sutra, by the way. It's about the 6th Chinese patriarch. And on the basis of hearing the Diamond Sutra, the Vajracchedika Sutra, he then attained awakening. Anyway, it's a wonderful story. Yeah, Huineng, the Sutra of Huineng, I think it's called, yeah. And then you also have what is known as the Flower Ornament Sutra. And that is what in Chinese, I think, is generally transliterated as phoneticized as Huayan. Yeah. Yeah, Huineng, the Sutra, Platform Sutra, Sutra of the 6th Patriarch. Okay. All right. Okay. Take care. Yes, have a lovely week.